Hi there! In last week's video, I'd painted the brickwork for my doll's house, so in this video I'm going to continue working on the exterior of the doll's house, thinking about the areas above the windows and also the stonework down the sides. So I started by making a little template so that I knew how big this area was above these two windows in the roof. If you've not watched any of my previous videos, I've decided to turn this doll's house into a converted warehouse with an art gallery at the bottom and an apartment above. In the area above the windows in the roof, I decided to try and create some miniature planks of wood, and I was going to paint them the same colour as the areas above the windows in the rest of the doll's house. So to do this, for each window I cut out two pieces of card that were the same size that fit into the area above the windows. And I then cut one of the pieces of card into little planks of wood. And I glued it down to the other piece of card. I trimmed the edge of each plank of wood just so that there'd be a little gap in between each one when I stuck them down. Now, at the top here, one of the bits of wood was hanging over a little bit and at the bottom as well, so when this was dry, I just trimmed it down. I also made little matching pieces to go at each side of the window, again just out of some card. I labelled them so that I didn't get confused when it was time to stick them down, and also so that I knew which side to paint. I'm watching this footage back thinking my fingers were very close to the blade there, so please don't copy me. Once this was fully dry, I used a little piece of sandpaper just to try and give some texture to the surface. I'd mentioned in a previous video that I was thinking of painting above the windows in either a dark green or a maroon colour. And I'd gone to my local DIY shop and I'd found a little tester pot for just 50p, and it was the perfect dark green. So I decided that this was what I was going to use to paint this area above my windows and also the area above the other windows as well. I did use 2 coats of paint for each piece. In my last video I had painted above these windows in dark brown, and I think that actually gave a really nice base coat for this green to go over. I only needed to put 1 coat on, and I actually think it made the green a little bit darker. I decided to leave the area above the main door because I already had decided that I was going to try and create a stone effect down the sides of the building, so I thought I would do a matching stone effect above the door. I am planning on carving a date in above the door into the stonework. I haven't quite decided yet whether to carve a fictional date in from the past to try and represent the age of this building, or whether to carve this year's date in to show that this was the year that it was renovated. So let me know your thoughts please in the comments. I carefully painted all of this woodwork around the top of the doll's house and all of the woodwork that goes up at an angle against the roof. I accidentally painted a little bit of the brickwork here, but it was alright, it rubbed off. I had to paint really carefully when I was doing the edges here because I didn't want to get any paint onto the brickwork, but it was such a thin edge to paint. I also decided to paint the window boxes in the same colour. I like the idea that I could add flowers to these window boxes and change them as the seasons change. I was thinking about painting the actual window frames up here black, but I'd like to hear your opinions on this because at the end of the video, I actually think they look quite nice as they are. So I'm not 100% decided whether to leave them as they are or whether to paint them. Whilst the green paint was drying, I decided to paint the chimney pots and also the inside of the window frame. So this is in the inside of the door because they were completely plain. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to decorate the inside areas of the house, whether the wall's going to be white, whether I want to add some brickwork inside the house or whether I'll wallpaper them, but I just thought for now it would be nice to have them matching. Sorry, I forgot to mention a minute ago that I painted in the little alcoves above the windows in the roof because I was going to obviously be putting the triangles of card that I'd made at the beginning of the video there, but I thought if I do a background base coat of green, it meant that if there were any gaps, it wouldn't be as visible. I also painted the edges inside the doll's house. This little step here does need to be a bit neater, but I thought I'd just add a coat whilst I was waiting for everything else to dry. Then I returned to the brickwork. So I decided that the little areas of cement in between the brick were standing out a little bit too much, so I decided to paint them a darker colour. This took quite a long time because it involved going back with a really tiny paintbrush and filling in all of the gaps. So now it was time to move on to the stonework. I used some yellow ochre paint and mixed it with water. Obviously I'm not using a jug that I use for food here, this is my painting jug. I started by just adding a little bit of water and mixed the paint with it until it was completely dissolved. And then I added a lot more water. I decided that I wanted a lot of this mixture so that I could use this for all of the stonework across the house, because from previous experience I've learned that if I mix up some more of this liquid for the next batch of filler, I might end up with a slightly different concentration of paint to water, which affects the colour. So in the same way that I made the bricks, I was just using some filler powder here. Obviously following any instructions on the fillers packet because each filler will be different. And I mixed it up into a paste. I then used a palette knife to really carefully pop it over these edges to create the stonework effect. This was tricky because I needed to work slowly so that I could be neat, but also the filler was drying as I was working, so I made sure not to mix up too much filler mixture each time so that I was only working in little sections. I was being really careful to make sure that I didn't put any of the filler mixture onto the bricks. As you can see here, the filler mixture was really bright and looked like new stonework. So once this is all dry, I will be going back and making it look a little more aged using some soft pastels, and I'll show you that in next week's video. Once I'd used up one batch of the filler mixture, it was time to start adding some detail. So I used my palette knife to just put some little indents in between each stone to make each stone look individual. I actually found that this was easier to do when this stonework was a little bit drier, but obviously not fully dry. I created the stonework on the edges of the house that I found easiest first, and the corners at the back of the house were definitely the easiest ones because I could do both sides of the corner, and then as I was making the indents I could travel around the corner. The edges were a little bit uneven, but once this is all dry I am going to go back and carve away at this filler to make sure that the shapes are exactly as I want them. Again, that will be in next week's video. Adding the filler to the area above the door was quite difficult, with it being such a small area and also curved. So I did this really carefully, and what I've actually done is put the filler on not as neatly as I want it to be when it's finished, because what I'm going to do is let it dry, and then again I'm going to carve away at the edges to try and make the shape the correct shape. I did also add some little indents into this to make it look like individual pieces of stone. I'd left the hardest areas till last, so this side here was going to be a little bit harder because I needed to make sure that this little hook could still spin. So I started by putting the filler down the edge of the door, and then I worked my way down this side, and when it came to applying the filler around the hook, I just smoothed on a really thin layer so that the hook could still move. I'm sorry I've basically filmed my hand here. It's really hard to film sometimes when the areas are really small and I get in the way of the camera. On the area where the hinge was, I applied the filler and then I opened and shut the door so that I could see if there were any areas where I needed to remove some of the filler. I then repeated this on the left hand side of the hinge and then smoothed away the filler that I needed to take off. So this is what my doll's house looked like when I first bought it, and as you can see the bricks were wallpapered on and down the edges it was just wood. And this is what my doll's house is looking like now. I forgot to actually get any footage of what the detail looks like above the windows in the roof space, so I'll film that in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, let me know what you think, and in next week's video I will age the stonework down the sides and above the door, and I'll also be adding the little door at the side of the building. I also need to start thinking about roof tiles. Thank you so much for watching. If you've not subscribed already, please do remember to hit subscribe. I try to post a video at least once every week, and I will see you next time. Thanks again.